A Rip City Real Talk back trade deadline edition. Anthony Blaylock, Craig Moshkow, your hosts. Tons of stuff to talk about. It's happened. It's happened. It's happened. We're gonna get into all of it. But before I get into all of it, I want everybody that's watching the start of this video to start chanting with me. Start chanting BLA. BLA. That was fun. Did you get to catch the game last night? Because that was fun.
That was okay. It's such a weird feeling when we're tanking like this because we want to keep our draft pick, but at the same time, how do you not want to beat LeBron and LA and the Lakers?
Anthony
And it's our
Davis
biggest
and all
rival.
those guys.
And I hate all of those players. I mean, I have respect for Russell Westbrook, and I just think I wanted to beat them. And it's funny seeing people online saying, "No, we got to lose this game for our pick." It's like, nah, we can afford to win one game a month. I don't mind.
We're gonna do just fine losing games, people.
Yeah.
Calm down.
Yeah, don't worry.
The Blevins, CJ Ellaby, and that roster's gonna Watford, and they're gonna get you plenty of losses. Don't worry.
Yeah.
But man, that was fun. I'm sorry watching Dennis Smith get 6 steals, Greg Brown getting dunks. It was second half Anthony Simmons, which he's not even. I don't know where he is in the first half ever, but he's there in the second half, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think we should make change his number to 2 because he only shows up in the second half of games.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little later for sure because that's a big part of all these trades that were made. But yeah, man, I was stoked. I mean, it kind of sucks that it had to be LA because that's kind of the one team that's only a couple games ahead of New Orleans for the play-in bubble. But we basically helped the Clippers. We helped the Clippers lock in a playoff spot. Let's be fair. So I don't think they're gonna lose out, and I don't see Minnesota losing out. But we'll get into that again. Just stoked. Man, that was a fun game. The atmosphere was cool. Josh Hart officially undefeated as a Trailblazer. So that's 1-0. 1-0. So
go on.
All that stuff was pretty stoked. But the other LA team is the bigger conversation piece, right? The Clippers. That was the first big deal of the week.
Yeah, so
really for anybody.
We're going to go through the whole trade deadline, but the Blazers made so it was a week before the deadline even really started. It was before the weekend. Today, Thursday, is the day we're recording, and the deadline is passed. But it was really weird. It was in the middle of the day, a week before the deadline, and the trade starts off listing what Portland is getting. That is Justice Winslow, Keon Johnson, Eric Bledsoe, and a Detroit 2025 second round pick, which is okay. And then you read the second half of the tweet, and it says that Portland's giving up Norm and Rocco. That's a lot to give up to me. Like,
yeah. The initial fan reaction wasn't great, and it shouldn't be. I mean, listen. We knew Rocco was gonna go. That's a gimme. All right, we knew he was gonna go, and he was probably gonna go to a competitor who needed some defense and then be able to get off that contract. Fine, cool. I thought maybe I didn't expect to get like a first round pick for Rocco. I didn't think that was realistic ever, just because
something
he didn't pan out in Portland. His stats weren't good enough to warrant that coming back, and his contract was expiring, et cetera, et cetera. Teams aren't going to give up a big asset for a half a year rental, especially the Clippers wouldn't have done you any good anyway. Their first round pick's probably going to be high. So,
you knocked Dame off the ledge back there.
That was so upset. That's what Dame is thinking right now. Did that just happen?
Upset that you just tanked Dame off the ledge.
Little Dame just committed suicide because. I'm sorry, little Dame. He's so upset that he's so upset that we traded Norman Powell. Because the Rocco thing, fine. Again, I'm not even upset about the Rocco side of things. The Norman Powell going out. Listen. Shocking. We've talked about it multiple times the last couple of episodes, how we really felt like Norman Powell should be the starting shooting guard. We're going to get into the Anthony stuff in a bit and how impactful Anthony is going to be going forward, etc. But to me, Norman Powell was the best situation as shooting guard for us because of his ability to play defense. He was the highest rated defender on this team from the guard position at 106. To me, that was the blow. You had a good player who can catch and shoot and drive and do everything you needed him to do as a third or fourth, even fourth option, depending on where things move from here.
True.
And he was at $20 million a year for a couple of years. I know it goes up gradually, but the average is about $20 million.
Sure.
And his age fits Dame. I don't know. To me, that was the big blow. And a lot of people wanted to talk about getting rid of Gary Trent Jr. for him and how we should never have gotten rid of Gary. We weren't keeping Gary. You couldn't afford Gary. And Gary was going to play out of position too. So to me, Norman Powell just you gave him away for nothing, and I don't understand it.
Okay, so I agree with you that the Rocco side of to me, like the Rocco for like Bledsoe is the total wash
Sure.
of that trade. It's all just going to basically within the next 6 months, we're going to forget that part was even a part of the deal. Justice Winslow, I like a lot. I
Yeah.
do. I've liked Justice Winslow for a long time, but he reminds me of Zach Collins, Nasir Little. He's very good when he's on the floor. He just can't stay healthy, and his durability is a question. That's something Portland has struggled with guys for the last 3 seasons. We keep bringing in guys who get hurt a lot, and we keep wondering why Larry Nance Jr. and Cody Zeller and all these guys can't stay on the floor. And they're decent players when they're out there, but it's becoming an issue. So I like Justice Winslow. I think he's versatile. I think he's a good defender. He can do a lot of playmaking. He's kind of a bigger Evan Turner, which makes sense for this team as it's currently constructed. He's not getting paid a ridiculous amount like Evan Turner was in 2016. So that's great. Keon Johnson is 6'5". He's a guard. I don't really understand that move. He was a first round pick, so that's fine. I mean, if he has talent, we're not going to see it for another year or two. And the Detroit 2025, that really doesn't do a whole lot for this current team during Dame's prime. So I agree with you. I think a lot of fans wanted to go into, well, you gave up 2 first round picks for Rocco, and you gave up Gary Trent and all these things for Norm. And it's like, okay, but if you look at Norm's contract, he was 5 years, $90 million. It doesn't matter what you gave up for those players. Like Neil is the one that put us into this disaster. Now Cronin's got to dig us out. The problem I have with it is it felt like this was a luxury tax move. And I don't want to give up Norman Powell to get under the luxury tax when it was a week before the deadline, and you could have waited and seen what happened with CJ, and you could have seen what the market was going to dictate for Powell, because Karis LeVert got traded 3 days later for a much better haul.
Yeah. Well,
I think they could have done better.
I think the Clippers are making that move for Rocco, whether you give them Powell or not. They were just desperate for a wing defender.
Yes.
I mean, we don't know if Kawhi is playing again this year. Paul George has been banged up. They needed that, and they were never going to keep Bledsoe. They knew that his contract was coming up. They're not going to pay him. They're going to cut him anyway. So they figure, you know what? Let's throw him over to Portland, who's trying to shed some money. I think that they would have loved to have a wing defender like Covington, and they would have made this move without having to throw Rocco in.
I agree.
Powell. And if you're going to throw Powell in, that's where you should have probably gotten a first-round pick back. It would have been a late pick, but it would have been a pick.
It's an asset.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think that Norman Powell is a loss to this team, but it is what it is. Keon Johnson, I don't.
Well,
like you said,
I think the Blazers were currying favor with these 2 vets, right? By saying, we're going to get you guys to a championship competing team. They're going to fill in this year and be really good. And then over the next 2 to 3 years, if Rocco decides he's going to re-sign with them, I don't know. But Norm's contract, that's a championship window. He's won a championship with Kawhi. So, I mean, you know that those guys are going to compete. So I think they were trying to curry favor a little bit with their vets and say, we want to get you to a place that you're going to win, and we also want to kind of get ourselves under the tax. My thing is timing. I just don't know why you have to make that trade a week before the deadline. Just be patient, drive the price up, see what other teams are going to pay for things like a Karis LeVert, and then put Norm on the open market. If you're going to make that trade, don't make it that early. I just think that package was going to be available, like you said, in 5 days. Why did you do it? That's my biggest what if, or like, why did you do that? But other than that, I mean, I think it's like a C minus trade. I don't think it's anything to write home about, but
yeah, the thing that you go in there is you're saving the money on Powell's contract the next couple of years. I mean, that's what you're doing. And there's a reason for it. And that's because they're planning on giving Anthony Simmons that money, the 20, and hopefully around 20 mil or so, and not much more.
So I hate to ask you this, man, because I think I know what your answer is going to be. But if you had to pay Norman Powell or Anthony Simmons $20 million over the next 3 years, who do you think is going to help you win more games?
Fans hate me. I just don't see Anthony as the starting guard next to Dame. This is nothing. It's the same thing with CJ. Same thing. It has nothing to do with Anthony Simon's skill as a basketball player. The kid is getting good before our eyes. He's going to be an offensive juggernaut. But he's not going to be Damian Lillard. I don't think he's going to be at that level. He's too inconsistent. I still see it. Look at his first halves. The guy comes out and just shoots terrible. And then, he lights it up in the second half. And he's fine. His distribution is great. He's making all sorts of good passes. The handle looks good. He can make any shot. I just don't think you're getting rid of Dame anytime soon. He's your superstar. And together, I just think you got a younger CJ. Fans don't like it. They're all enamored right now with Anthony Simons because he's had the opportunity to shine. But what happens when he has to play with Dame? What happens when his ball is not going to be in his hands? And you can still run him at some point guard and run Dame off ball like you've done with CJ in the past. But I think everything that confidence and that mindset changes when you are on the court with a superstar who you're going to be looking to get the ball to
defer to.
It just changes a lot of stuff that people aren't thinking about. Powell doesn't care if he's the first, second, or even third option on this team. He's an opportunistic scorer who plays much better defense. For those who are wondering, Anthony Simons has a worse defensive rating than CJ McCollum. So do with that as you will. But Powell, I just felt like for the contract, to get a guy who's not going to be greedy, who's a perfect shooting guard next to Dame, to go out and surround with another forward who can be an offensive scorer and really just do what you need to do, and then you bring back Nurk cheap, you're in a better situation, I think, than running Anthony and Dame on the court at the same time. Nothing against Anthony. I just don't think he's worth that contract.
That's why I asked.
Over Powell.
That's why I asked, because I literally say what we basically just did with this trade. I think you could have got more of a return for Anthony Simons by trading him now and using Dame and Rocco as your starting Dame and Powell as your starting backcourt. But I get the argument. I do. The other thing is you're sort of hedging your bets a little bit, because if Dame demands out, you still have a number one combo guard that can probably score you 30 to 40 a night. So you're hedging your bets on a rebuild at some point if Dame demands out this summer. I get both of those angles. All I'm saying is, if we really wanted to go all in right now, I think you would have kept Norm on this team, and I think you could have financially. I don't think that contract, that 5 years, $90 million, like Bill Simmons and other podcasts talk about how crazy high that contract is for Norm. I don't think so. I think he's a winning player, two-way player on both ends of the floor, championship guy. I do think he has some negatives to his game, but it's not going to be hurting you defensively, and that's something that Portland struggles with massively. So I don't know, man. This is a hard one for me, but we can keep moving if you want.
No, I mean, you're not wrong. I think we're right in so many different avenues here. It just, to me, Powell was the guy to have over Amp now. Like you said, Dame's got a small window, 4 to 5 years, and really 2 to 3 strong years. And then, you start, maybe he wants to demand. I don't think he's demanding out any of that nonsense.
No,
but in a couple of years, maybe you start to think a little differently. His play is going to slow down, and it's nice to know that you have Amp in the wings. Mm-hmm. I just don't think 20 mil is feasible. I think and it sucks. It sucks that Dame and CJ got hurt when they did, because all that did is give Amp a chance to shine, and shine he has, but that has driven his price up. Yes. If this doesn't happen, you could probably bring him back at like 3 years, 10 to 11 mil. He's only 22, and then you look into giving him the bigger money down the road. So the fact that teams are seeing what he can do, the spotlight's on him. He just went out and dominated the Lakers. That price is going to be high. It's going to be in low 20s. It's probably over 20 at this point. I don't see a world where he's not getting 22, 21, 23, if not 25 a year.
Yeah.
So
it could be
It is what
high.
it is. But moving Powell is basically locking in Anthony Simons to be your guard of the future. As soon as that move was made, we talked about it. We knew that CJ was probably gone. There was a little bit of wavering on the fence here and there, whether he'd be gone at the deadline or at the draft time or off season, but we kind of figured you're paying Anthony with that money. That's the only reason you get rid of Powell, which means you have your starting shooting guard of the future, which means CJ's gone. And that's the next big trade.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And it was, oh, man. And, it's okay. Real quick. The first thing we should focus on is CJ McCollum is a top 10 Blazer for us in our lifetime. He's probably like top 5 Blazer we'll ever get to see. The dude contributed to some of the deepest runs we've ever made during our lifetime, because we weren't around in 77. CJ McCollum is an amazing combo guard. He's a little undersized. He's just an amazing story in the NBA, and Blazer fans should not take for granted his career, what he did for us in 2019 Game 7 against Denver, and all the playoff runs. It's really unfortunate that Dame and CJ are so similar and so redundant, and their ages are the same, and they came up in the league together, because if one of them had their own team to run, and we're going to see that with CJ when he goes to New Orleans, but if one of them had their own team to just run by themselves, I think CJ's almost as good as Dame. He has a little bit different skill set in scoring, and he doesn't get as many free throws, and he doesn't draw as many fouls, but he's dominant in the mid range, and he has some ridiculous moves. He can do things that Dame can't. So, just talking about CJ's career as a Blazer is kind of astonishing, and we take it for granted because Dame was such an alpha dog in this league. But when you heard the trade for CJ, what was your first initial reaction?
Well, the first reaction was we knew it. We were right this entire time. Ha ha ha.
I didn't think they were going to do it. You actually did. You said they were going to do it.
Yeah,
I was
did. I told you, once Powell got traded, I knew that they were opening up that money for AMP, and the CJ was coming. Right. I just didn't know if it'd be the deadline or if it would be in the off season. But when things started really heating up in the rumors with the Pelicans obviously being the first team, and then we saw the Knicks and the Hawks come up, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah,
I kind of figured that it was going to happen. There was too much heat on that, and with moves being, once you got rid of Powell and Rocco, there was obviously big changes being made. I think you strike while that iron was hot.
Mm-hmm.
You're already ready to tank. So yeah, but honestly, okay. So outside of my initial reaction of, I'm glad they finally broke the two of them up, and it had nothing to do. Same thing I've been saying with AMP. I had nothing to do with CJ. I love CJ. You are absolutely right. One of the top 5 Blazers that I've gotten to watch in my lifetime, behind probably Dame, LaMarcus, and Roy. I mean, it is extremely unfortunate, the situation that we drew ourselves into. 2 offensive guards. If we could have had the Curry-Klay Thompson combination, we would have been much better off. But instead we didn't. And I wish him nothing of the best. I'm glad the Pelicans are where he gets to go, because he gets to be that veteran presence on a team with Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson. I think that they got the 2 forwards that Portland's always wanted. I mean, they got the guys that if we had with Dame, we'd probably have a championship by now. I think 2019, we're talking championship. He gets to go and live in that now for the last couple of years of his prime. He's going to have another good 4 or 5 years. I think the Pelicans keep him. They got him for a while. So I'm stoked for him. I think it's a perfect situation. We've talked multiple times in this pod throughout the last couple of years about going to his own team and what he could potentially do. But man, am I glad to see them get off of the... I thought we were getting off of the 2 offensive guard thing.
It's going to
whatever.
be
it is what it is. I'm going to be sitting. A year from now. Mark my words, people. Mark this conversation. I'm going to do the whole fancy Blazers uprise pin my tweet with my prediction. And I'll probably be just as wrong as they were. Probably. But I'll I'm gonna say that Anthony Simons is not going to be the answer. And it's unfortunate that we finally broke off CJ, but I'm happy we're going to see a different team. We're finally going to change something up from the same recipe and the same soup that we've been making, and add a little salt and add a little pepper and see what happens. So much respect for CJ. Best of wishes. Kind of happy you're not a Blazer anymore, but it had nothing to do with you or your personality. I just want to see what Dame can do if we can go get him, an actual front court player, a forward, I should say.
Yeah.
More so than anything.
Okay, so let's set the table for the trade, right? First of all, before we even talk about CJ, his skill set and what he can do, let's talk about, he's 30 years old. He has 4 years left on his deal at like 30 plus million. I think it's
going,
and it goes up. The bar graph poison pill, right? So it's like 30, 33, 30. So he's going to get more expensive as he ages, which is not good. He is a smaller guard with defensive limitation. So to me, as an asset, yes, a lot of people are saying Neil should have traded him 2 or 3 years ago. I agree. We said that on this pod. We've been saying that. So that's not a surprise to us. I thought CJ was borderline unmovable about 3 months ago. I was like, I don't even think you can trade him. And you've been saying all along, yes, you can. Yes, you can. You can trade him. There's things you can do. And you were right. Now, we didn't get a front court player, and that's fine. It's whatever. So CJ, we send out Larry Nance. We'll talk about that in a minute. And Tony Snell, which I am not really sad about because I didn't really think Tony Snell was very good. And we brought in Josh Hart, who I think we both like. We'll talk about Nickeil Alexander-Walker. We got kind of a first-round pick. And then Satoransky's expiring deal, which has already been shipped out. So what do you think?
I love Josh Hart. I love Josh Hart. I have him on my fantasy basketball team, so I'm a little biased here. But he's 6'5" or something like that. He still plays guard, but he's got a little more length to him to where you could play fill him in even almost better than you could Norman Powell at 6'3" at the small forward position.
Yes,
if you had to.
Absolutely.
And to me, he's, depending on what you do with the forward position, which we're going to talk a little bit about, I love him off the bench. Now, his contract is not guaranteed, so you essentially took back more or less another expiring deal. I mean, it's not expiring because you can choose to waive him or not.
Yeah.
So non-guaranteed, so you can cut him for nothing as long as you do it before June. which they will make that decision well before then. But I think he's only, 12, 13 mil?
It's 12.9 next year, so 13 mil. He's a very good deal for a borderline starter. I mean, he's basically going to be our starting three, I
let's
think.
put it this way. They haven't had Zion Williamson all year. They haven't had any other real guards. I mean, Devontae Graham has kind of been a disappointment if you're a Pelicans fan, probably, considering what he did in Charlotte. So for a team to be better than the Blazers and in the playoff bubble, I keep saying bubble because the whole bubble, but the play-in tournament, to be in that little range there is a lot of it to do with him. If you watch his stats, I mean, he's not flashy. He can get you 20 plus a game here and there if he's really feeling hot, but he's going to give you 10 to 15. By far one of the best rebounding guards in the league.
The best. I think.
Russell
Westbrook. I don't know.
Russell Wilson.
I don't
Russell
know.
Westbrook.
Yeah.
But he's one of the better rebounding guards, which takes pressure off of your center and because we haven't really had any good rebounding forwards in a while. No. So he takes some pressure off of those guys. He's a good playmaker. He's a decent defender, not amazing, but probably right in that same level as Powell. Decent. So I love what he can do coming off the bench or in spot small forward minutes, depending on what you do with some of this money. I'm going to get into that, but I like it. I love bringing him back and having the option to do with him as you will. You can either cut him and save yourself some cash, or you can bring him back on a pretty favorable deal for another year. And then there's another option for you at the trade deadline next year with an expiring deal. If he plays as good as we hope he does, I mean, he could be a good pivotal piece for another team that needs to get another Norman Powell, for instance.
I concur completely. I love Josh Hart. I think Josh Hart and Justice Winslow are perfect, like middle age. They're middle of their career. They're kind of cheap still. They haven't delivered on winning teams, so they're not really expensive the way like Norman Powell is. But they're really good role players on good teams that have had success. And I think Josh Hart is the perfect 3 for this team. I think he could play 2 a lot, just like Powell could. He's a little undersized for the 3. I'm not saying I want to roll him out there for 30 minutes, but I think he can contribute a lot to this team. He plays good defense. And I think Winslow and Hart are going to be able to blitz a lot more in Chauncey's system than Rocco could. They're much more versatile. I think they can do a lot more. So I'm super happy with having him on the team. Is he the ideal return for CJ? No. Is sending out Larry Nance in that trade great? No. Everybody was kind of upset about it. But here's the thing. There was something going on with Larry's knee. He hadn't played, and then every time he was about to play or he was probable to play, all of a sudden it was like, oh, there's inflammation or something. And it was like, that's kind of weird, right? And then next thing you know, he's in the trade, and then the day of or the day after, he gets shut down for the rest of the year with surgery. So, I mean, I guess maybe you lost out on Larry Nance as an asset next year, but I'm not really upset.
He was done after this year anyway. It was a 1-year deal. He wasn't coming back.
Good.
So
I'm good.
I don't know. The big thing, and the big thing is the pick, right? That's what you're getting out of this. You're already going to get a lottery pick for being a Blazer fan because you're not making the playoffs.
This trade seals it.
I mean, we are 1-0 since the trade. Just saying, but
that's true. Dang it, Josh Hart.
But undefeated. But I mean, the Pelicans. Chances are they're not going to make the playoffs. And for people who don't know, it is protected in the sense that it's a lottery protected pick and they're protected 1 through 4. So basically they can't make the playoffs and they can't have the lottery balls fall between 1 and 4. Now, if any team is primed to screw us over, it's the trade Anthony Davis and get Zion Williamson with the number 1 overall pick ping pong ball situation. I mean, screw them.
Could you imagine if they get 4 or something and we lose?
That's what I'm saying. I mean, how do they go in there with the 6th or 7th best chance and they get the number 1 pick? So I'm not saying that they can't go screw us over, but chances are pretty slim, which means the Blazers should have 2 lottery picks. We'll say middle of the pack lottery picks. I don't think we're going to
5 through 14.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to fall too far down, but our pick should be a little bit better, and their pick hopefully will be in that 10, 11, 12 range, if not a little bit lower. So that's what the CJ trade is bringing in. Not to mention you get off of CJ's contract, obviously, which, as we just talked about, an aging player who doesn't really fit your system. We've seen that same song and dance. You get off that raising contract. So that's the big deal there. Because if you do decide to get rid of Hart, you've got a lot of money back in your pocket.
You do. And long-term money, because you think Norm and CJ were both re-signed for the next 4 years. So it's like you've got yourself out of a pretty big hole there financially and to be able to shuffle the deck. I know we didn't bring a lot in asset wise, but I don't think it's that bad. I think if you look at it next year, you're going to say, okay, we're able to maybe make a play at Jeremy Grant. We're maybe able to make a play at insert whatever star you want. It could be Karl Anthony Towns. I'm not saying it's possible, but you had no shot as of a week ago.
Yeah.
So
no, this team was going to be locked into the same group for a while. So this move had to be made. I agree. It wasn't the, that's the reason I brought up the Knicks and the Hawks earlier is because he was primed. The Knicks became a huge front runner for him there for a moment, just for a hot minute. And then you had the same thing with the Hawks, had his name mentioned. I never thought that. We talked about it with some people. I don't think that was ever happening. If you're the Hawks, you're not putting CJ and Trey in the same backcourt.
No.
So, but it was fun to think about, right? John Collins. Julius Randle. Like you start thinking about the power forwards that you could have brought in, and there's so many people that were against Randle. Shut up. I'm sorry. You just stop it. You get a front court player that can pass the ball like that and rebound and score at will and have a low post press. Bye, CJ.
Yeah.
That didn't happen. So I would have liked to see something like that. I mean, I think that was the situation that you were looking forward to the most, but whatever. You get a first round pick probably, and that's going to give you a lot of flexibility at the draft for trade, depending on where our ball and the Pelicans ball falls. So there's still things that can be done. You also got a 20+ mil trade exception. So, there are things that you can potentially do still on this team by opening up that money. And I do think they're not done. They're just going to wait for these first round picks to fall through.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting because let's say the 2 picks fall at like 7 and 10. Those are really good assets with that player exception or that trade exception to say, okay, let's make a play on somebody. Let's push here. Let's give up these 2. Now, I'm not saying they should trade the first round picks because I kind of think they should look and analyze what kind of type of player they could get. But I mean, if you think about it, Damian Lillard and Myers Leonard were taken, I think, 7 and 10 in their draft.
11, and but yeah,
7 and 11, 6 and 11. So you can look at a draft and say, I don't know. I mean, you have like maybe 50% chance or less of finding a good player. There's a lot of times where you could find, I don't know, Michael Carter-Williams. And no, they're not going to be a franchise level player, but it gives you assets. And that's something we didn't have because Neil emptied the cupboard for that locked in team. Now you have to kind of shuffle the deck again. You got to shake the Etch-a-Sketch, and it may not look as pretty as you thought it was going to, but trading CJ was hard, and I think trading Norm was kind of a big decision as well.
That's the one that still kills me. But trading CJ, you're right. You're opening up the flexibility, and that's the biggest thing here. You only have a couple more years of Dame, and I say a couple. I mean, 4 to 5 years probably. This is about the rest of the grease that you're going to get on Dame's wheel here. And that's what you got to do something different. You can't keep CJ. I know we all wanted some big flashy trade. I was sitting there thinking, okay, give me Jeremy Grant. The Ben Simmons stuff was coming up. Let's face it, CJ is no James Harden.
I don't think that was ever a thing.
So it just kind of runs into the situation where you got to do something while you can. I think it was time. I love how they had talks with him. I think the front office involving CJ, for those that don't know, they sat down with him and said, hey, you're going to get traded. Yes. Let's look at your options. That might be one of the reasons that he didn't want to go to New York. Maybe he doesn't want to go sit behind the Kemba Walker and Emmanuel Quickly. Who knows what you get back in that deal? But maybe he's like, this is Randall and Barrett's team. I don't want to go here. Maybe the same thing with the Hawks. Maybe you're like, yeah, we can trade you to the Hawks. He's like, no. I don't want to go deal with Trae Young. I don't. So now he gets to go be the guard on a team that's young, growing, and that he can kind of have a couple good years with, where he's the guy. I mean, Zion's probably their guy, but still, you get what I'm saying. I think that was cool that they got to sit down. I'm not terribly upset about what they got back. The biggest thing with these 2 trades is going to be what you do with what you got back, right?
Yeah.
I think having 2 first-round picks, I like the idea of trading one to try to get an asset and then keeping yours. If you can trade that New Orleans pick, somebody's going to want that. And it's going to get like a contending team that's not going to normally have a high pick. Perfect. And then you keep yours and you have a lot of flexibility there. So I don't know. I mean, not the trade I would hoped that we would have made, but I'm glad to get off of that and try something different. This roster is never going to do much more than what it's done the last couple of years.
And I respect Cronin for saying something, doing it, sticking it out, not just waiting till the draft or whatever to do it, because we as fans have been clamoring for this for a couple of years now, and then nothing happened and nothing happened. And we kept getting sold this bill of goods that this team is good enough to compete for a championship. When we say it's not, I'd rather make a move and a decision. For years, we sat here and said trade CJ for basically anything. And then when it happens, all these fans are like, oh, I'm really sad to see him go. We shouldn't have traded him. We didn't get enough. It's like, you can't have it both ways. You can't make everybody happy. So I respect him for making the tough decisions. I agree with you that it is kind of an incomplete grade at this point because we do need to make a move to bring in a franchise-altering player probably this offseason. Now, whether you use draft capital to do that, whether you're able to make a trade and pull it off, whether you bring in a free agent and you can just sign somebody because Dame is out there recruiting. That's something every year people say. Dame's out there recruiting. He's out there talking to people. Portland has never been historically a free agent destination. We've had a hard time signing top-level stars, and I get that. But if you want to try, you need flexibility. And that's what we've accomplished here. It's you said it. It's flexibility. It's the ability to have money when you need to draw upon it, or the assets to make a play for a Ben Simmons when he demands out. And I understand that Ben Simmons is not a perfect asset in any regard, but if KD demands out and you have the assets to do it and nobody else does, it's a great ploy. We haven't had that in years, and I'm excited to have, and I'm also excited to have a different backcourt. I'm so tired of Dame and CJ, bro. It's been too much. Honestly, it has.
Yep. We're at a point right now where we just got the touchdown at the end of the game and we just need 1 point to tie it up. And you can kick the extra point and do the same thing you've been doing forever, the safe thing, run CJ back, or you can go for 2 and try to win it. You may not get it and you lost, but we're going for 2 right now. I love the fact. I mean, it's a gamble. It's a risk, but it's a risk that if it works out and you are able to bring somebody back in that can change the face of this team with Anthony up and coming, you still have Nasir Little up and coming. You have a couple years left of Dame. You take advantage of you got to do something. You got to take a risk. And if it doesn't work out, at least we tried. At least we tried. Then you're done anyway. I mean, you're done anyway. You're not doing anything right now with this roster. Dame's not getting any younger. You weren't going to do anything. You make a change. If you don't do anything, then you trade Dame in a couple of years. You move on. You rebuild. That's how it's going to be. So,
What about the other trade? We haven't even covered it yet.
Oh, one of my favorite players.
The biggest trade of the deadline. So we acquired Joe Ingles, is expiring, bird rights.
Which they say they like. Joe Ingles is a Blazer next year, buddy.
I'm going to ask you about that here in a minute. Elijah Hughes and a second rounder, and you give up Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who's kind of an undersized guard.
Blazers legend.
And $5 million in salary next year is what he was owed. So you're kind of getting off of more money next year to expire up right now.
And you technically got rid of Satoransky as you gave him to the Spurs.
Yep, that's right.
You got off his expiring contract.
10 mil expiring.
Yep.
What'd you think?
I don't know. Nickeil Alexander-Walker just didn't.
Never panned out for anybody.
It doesn't do anything for me. You're right. It's another guard that we don't need. I'd rather have a Hart or somebody else playing backup guard for me. Those guys, you can get a dime a dozen. You might as well get off that money. Ingles is interesting. It's funny because we actually saw the Ingles stuff a couple weeks ago. There was the potential Rocco to the Jazz for Ingles thing, and then he got hurt like a day after that report kind of came out. We started talking about it amongst our group, and oh, I don't know, Ingles. Yeah, he can make plays. He's an all right defender. He can shoot the 3 just as good as Rocco. Blah blah. We made all those comparisons, and then that injury, and we still ended up with him. And we didn't even have to trade Rocco for him. I don't know, man. The injury seems rough to me, but guys have come back from worse. He's Australian or something. Is he?
He's Australian.
Is he Australian? Because you don't call an Australian a New Zealander and vice versa. It's not good. You don't do that. So so Australian, which is what I thought. Those guys are tough, right? Rugby and fighting crocodiles and kangaroos.
34 though. 34 and a torn ACL.
Australia is like 25 here. I mean,
look. With the bird rights, I don't know what you could sign him to, but if it's really little, I'd be okay with taking a shot. Other than
the injury and the age are going to make him viable. But now here's my question for you: if you bring him back, and the Blazers like him and all that good stuff, if you bring him back, he's probably your backup 3. Forward, one of those wings that you're going to bring off the bench. Ideally, the Blazers are making a trade for somebody. Nasir Little's still a thing here, so and Hart. Anyway, so we have guys that are probably going to be more of a viable starter. If it comes down to bringing back Joe Ingles, the Australian machine, all right, the guy who looks like a teacher that just destroys you at the rec league out of nowhere.
Toby from
or you get to bring back Justice Winslow, who is a similar skill set, not a good or way better defender, but a playmaking guy that can come in. Who do you bring back?
I'd pay Justice Winslow twice as much money as I'd pay 34-year-old Joe Ingles after a torn ACL. Look, I think Joe Ingles can still probably play make a little bit. He'll be in the right spots and he'll be a good spot up shooter, but he's going to be so limited defensively on a team that's already struggling with that. I would much rather have Justice Winslow. He can play 3 or 4. It's just a lot more to offer on the defensive end. And I think Joe Ingles is aging. And I think he looked washed this year. I mean, I watched him play a little bit.
There's a reason the Jazz are trying to get rid of him during a championship caliber year.
Exactly. He didn't look good. And the Jazz already needed more shooting and spacing, I think, around Mitchell and Conley. So, I mean, it's just... I don't think Joe Ingles is worth a shot unless he's really cheap. And like you said, he's coming off the bench and he's willing to fill a pretty deep bench role, but we'll see where he's at. I mean, he's going to be 35 and off a torn ACL, so we'll see.
Yeah, I'd rather have Winslow. Winslow, just the injury stuff bugs you. That's really what bugs you. But now, I mean, Ingles is no different. You're aging, you have a knee injury. But if anybody needs to know why we choose Winslow over Ingles, just watch that game last night. Watch what he was doing against LeBron when he was bodying him up, forcing him to take bad shots or turning over the ball. He looked perfect in his first game. That's the kind of stuff that you're going to get to see night in, night out from him. And that's exactly what you want.
I heard people saying like higher IQ Mo Harkless. I think that's a good comparison. He's not as athletic above the rim as Mo Harkless can be, but I think he's...
I thought Mo Harkless's name, but then the Evan Turner thing kind of made more sense to me.
Bigger Evan Turner is what I call him.
Yeah,
he doesn't shoot the 3 very well. He might hit 1 or 2 a game. He's a little better shooter than Evan Turner. I think that's a little bit of a knock to Justice Winslow, but I really think that's a good comp for Justice Winslow, and I think that's what he can do for this team, but he'll play the 4, not the 3.
Yeah, agreed. So. I think that's perfect. So rather have him. Just curious. Those are the 2 wings that you have on the team right now, and really you're probably bringing one of them back. I would think, depending on how the year. I mean, Ingles, I doubt. I just don't. I think you just picked them up to get a pick and get off of it.
So we got
Walker Alexander.
At least 2 seconds that we know of. We got at least, hopefully, a first from the Pelicans. If that conveys into a second, that's going to make things a little rough. And then you talked about the exception, that's $20 million, and a ton of salary relief. Other than maybe Justice Winslow, who's a borderline starter, Josh Hart, who I think is definitely a starter on this team, and some younger talent in Keon Johnson, and Elijah Hughes, who I've heard is actually looks pretty good for a young guy at small forward. G League-ish development player. But hey, if you want to talk G League development player, Greg Brown III and Trenton Watford have both looked really good lately, and we're not going to go into that on this pod much, but they both look like players I think the Blazers should hold on to for a while.
Yeah, there's some youth there, and the length that you get from the youth. It's the first time we've had a lot of athleticism on the team, true athleticism. Yeah. Derek Jones doesn't count. I never want to speak his name again. By the way, everybody, in case you know my gripes with Derek Jones, just so you know, he's hurt. Go figure. The guy was always banged up, and he was only playing 17 minutes a game for the Bulls. Just he got benched and he didn't get a lot of time. I wonder why.
What is Stotts doing? He's only playing Derek. He's not playing Derek Jones Jr.
Yeah, it was definitely an all Stotts.
What is Stotts doing?
Anyway, sorry, I'm not going to spend too much time on Derek Jones Jr.
Yeah.
He was going to be my ex-Trailblazer of the week, just so I could make fun of him, but I'm not going to. I shouldn't make fun of him. Derek, I know you watch the pod. You're a big follower, Derek. I don't mean anything by it. It's all just good fun. But I do think we have a lot of good stuff going forward, and that's one thing I want to talk to you about. But before I get to it, my man, I do want to do the Blaze of New Trails Player of the Week, because we've spent all this time talking about the trades, trading left and right. All right, all these players. I could pick from a dozen guys right now.
Yes.
But instead, I'm going to pick a guy that was once upon a time a mid-round lottery pick for the Portland Trail Blazers, because that's what we're hoping to get 2 of potentially. Then I'm not talking about CJ McCollum, but I'm talking about a guy that was picked 10th overall by the Portland Trailblazers way back when. Our boy, one of your favorite Trailblazers, nicest hair on the team until CJ Ellaby came aboard, Zach Collins. Zach Collins, there he is. Look at him. Look at the hair, the perfect part. Guy couldn't grow facial hair to save his life, but man, his hair on top of his head was perfect. Made his debut in the last 2 games ago for the Spurs. They signed him to a contract this year. We talked about that when he was originally signed. doesn't look amazing, but he looks like a solid backup big as he gets his feet. It was like 400 and something games. I don't remember the exact amount.
It's been a long time.
Went out, I think it was against the if I'm not mistaken, it was against the Mavs. Really early 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't play for us all year last year, didn't get to play in the bubble because he was hurt as well. So poor guy's been going through the ringer with injuries, but he's back. He's playing with the Spurs. He gets to play with Popovich and that system where I think his skill set will best be utilized. So congrats, man. I'm really stoked that you get to come back and you're getting back into the NBA and playing reasonable minutes and good minutes on a young upcoming team.
Yep, he's been good. So just to be fair, he's had 13 minutes and 18 minutes in his 2 games. He had 10 points, 7 rebounds in his first game. Second game, 5 and 7. But I think they traded Jakob Poeltl today, and I think I think Zach's going to get a lot of minutes for the Spurs. Actually, for real, I think he might actually start for them pretty soon.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they're just warming. I think he's one of the reasons that they felt they could make a trade.
They're good.
So for that, man. I'm super stoked for him. Congrats on making it back. I wish it would have panned out in Portland. It didn't, but
me too.
Yeah, so good for him.
Yeah.
There's your update, everyone, on X-Blazers. I'm going to have X-Blazers for days after all these trades. So
if Zach Collins becomes a really good 5 that can block and stretch the floor, it's going to be really painful.
Especially for the Spurs, because you just know how good they make their bigs. Their bigs are always ridiculously good.
Yeah. Well,
speaking of bigs, the big move that a lot of people thought we were going to make, he was one of those expiring contracts that we didn't trade, and that's Jusuf Nurkic.
Oh boy,
are you surprised they didn't move him? I know Charlotte's name came up. I mean, you see guys like Poeltl and Porzingis and all these centers and bigs being moving around.
Yeah,
Sabonis. So what do you think about a Nurk not getting moved?
I thought about this all day long, and I saw people complain.
I can see it in your head.
I saw people complaining and saying, why didn't we trade Nurkic? And it's we talked about it last week. We talked about it the week before. Centers are a hot commodity in this league, and it's really hard to find a starting caliber one. In my opinion, there was only one center that was moved at this trade deadline that is better in caliber night in and night out than Jusuf Nurkic, and that was Sabonis. I think Sabonis is a little bit undersized to play center all of his minutes. I don't think he's very good defensively, and I don't think he would have fit in great with what Portland does because he's just a little bit better than Nurkic at everything Nurkic does offensively, right? He's a better hub. He's a better playmaker. He's a better passer. He'd probably be an interesting shooter. He's a challenge. Yeah. He's a much better shooter. But Dame's never really been able to use a pick and pop shooter before. I mean, not since LaMarcus, and that was forever ago. So no, I'm not surprised. If you listen to the pod and you're a sub to the pod, which you should be, why wouldn't you sub to our pod? It's completely free. Go sub. But we're not surprised because we think Nurkic is probably the best mid-level, decent contract center you're going to be able to afford. I'd rather have Nurkic than probably Poeltl. I'd probably have him close to Valanciunas in skill set, which we've talked about in the past. He's much better than a Steven Adams at this point in his career. Enes Freedom just got waived today, completely for free. Daniel Tice is getting tossed around the league back and forth back to Boston again. So look, I would much rather have Nurkic than Daniel Tice. I would much rather have Nurkic than Enes Freedom. There are other teams that are struggling to find centers. I'm okay with keeping Nurkic. Do I think it's the best move in the world? No. But if you wanted Sabonis, we would have had to have traded Anthony Simons, probably one of those firsts that you're talking about. We would have had to promise and protect one of those firsts, and maybe something else just to get Sabonis because that's what he got traded for. Miles Turner didn't get traded. Jeremy Grant didn't get traded. So all these things that the Blazer fans wanted didn't happen, and it's whatever. But you know how I feel about this. You go ahead.
All right. I mean, I was talking to somebody about it today, I think on Twitter, and I was mentioning, I think their plan is to re-sign him. Now, there's been other names that have come up, right? I've heard the Mo Bambas. Danny Marang's a big Mo Bamba guy. I don't know what universe people think Orlando's going to just let Mo Bamba go. I know they have Wendell Carter, but I think they're very content running two of these bigs back. I mean, Miles Turner's another name, but they traded Sabonis. I think they had to pick and choose one of those two guys, and they chose Sabonis because they got the value back. So I think they run Isaiah Jackson, and I think they run Miles Turner going forward.
Maybe you could get Rashawn Holmes from Sacramento, but again, Nurkic and Rashawn Holmes are pretty close in skill set, and Nurkic knows your offense. He plays with Dame. It's just
I don't.
That's all there's to say.
I don't know if I care for Nurkic being our center going forward. I mean, if I had a choice, I'd probably want somebody more athletic and younger, but they just don't grow on trees.
No.
And the only option you're really going to have is if you take some of this cap and you go out and try to pull Ayton away from Phoenix. I mean, he's really the only thing that's out there. If anybody's looked at the free agency pool for this year, it's not great. I mean, there's plenty of guards. I mean, you've got Levine, you got Beal, you got guys out there at the guard position, but you're not getting rid of Anthony, right? He's cheaper than those guys are going to be, and you already have Dame. So the big man pool is not super hot. So I just don't see a world where you want to pay Ayton to pull him away from the Suns anyway. And Ayton, again, is he a guy that you really think is worth paying big bucks to when you can get Nurk back for 10 to 12 mil? No, probably not.
Yeah.
So I just think that the price is going to be there for Nurk. I think they didn't trade him because they're planning on giving him another 3-year deal or so. I'm sure they've had those conversations. I think the front office has already shown that they're willing to talk to players and kind of give them an idea of what's going to go on. And that's a lot, right? If you don't bring back Nurk and you don't already have a plan in place to bring him back, now you're trying to fill 3 starting positions with, after you pay Amp, not as much money as people think we have.
Yeah. Well, and I you're right. I wrote down in my notes, look, I still don't love Nurkic in Chauncey's system. I don't think he's the ideal center for it. But I think recently, and I mean, you've watched a lot of these games, you've seen, I think they've backed off Nurk a little bit under the 3-point line on the hedge. He's not going as deep on the hedge, so he's not getting fully out of position. And I do think that Chauncey, with the right buy-in from the wings, athletic wings, versatile wings that can rotate better, I think he can sort of play with Nurkic's positioning in the defense and find a sweet spot for Nurkic. You know, it's not like we have to sit here and say Nurkic is a bishop. He can only move one certain way on the chessboard. But I think you and I are completely aligned on this. If there was a blatant upgrade for Nurkic, yes, we would take it today. If there was a way that the Blazers could play small ball with some Jeremy Grant at the 5 where he's like dominating and being Draymond Green or Ben Simmons, but those guys aren't really available to Portland. So you just got to make the best with the boat that you have. And right now that boat is Yusuf Nurkic, and he's an absolute monstrosity of a boat. So you just got to play to his strengths. And I hope Chauncey can tweak the system for him a little bit.
Yeah, my only worry is the one problem with Nurk's defense the last couple of years is, again, being too slow to get back and help a lot of the times.
Yeah.
They haven't had a lot of good wing defenders. I mean, I can't say Rocco's not a good wing defender, but he just didn't work. Problem is, it's even why Rocco, I don't think, was successful here, good grief, is because we don't have that point of attack defense with the guards to slow anything down. You're not getting any better with Anthony Simmons. Sorry, everyone. And nobody wants to make it out like he's so young. He can still develop into a good defender. He is athletic. He's a little longer.
Yeah.
But I just haven't seen enough from him. You shouldn't have a worse defensive rating than TJ McCollum. I'm sorry. So it worries me that you're going to have Nurk in that same role with the same type of players on the outside or from the guard position that you're trying to make up for. Any wing that you bring in here. It hasn't been a recipe for success for any team in this league, and especially not the Portland Trailblazers. So that's what worries me, but I think that's why he wasn't moved. I do think he's the plan at center going forward. I just think he's familiar. He's going to come in an okay price, and they probably already had some kind of conversations that we're not aware of. They're just going to wait till the offseason to make that a priority. So,
yep, I agree. And if, like I said, if some center gets feisty and wants out this year, the Blazers have the right set of assets to make that move.
Flexibility.
We have flexibility. That's something we've asked for. I've been very critical of the Blazers for having zero wiggle room, and now we have it, and it's time. It's time to go.
Yep. So that's all that. Yep. That's going forward.
I'll take my notes.
Going forward, we have the money now to deal with that. There was one other thing that I want to talk about, and I've been talking about it for the last couple of weeks, and I really wish that would have become an availability for us during this offseason. But how do you make out the Jeremy Grant rumors? This was still coming up after the CJ McCollum trade was made, so they were obviously still trying to make a move to get Grant on the team. I think Detroit was probably smart in waiting to the offseason, to the draft, to try to get something for him.
Yep.
I don't think Portland should give up both first-round picks for him at all, which has so far been the asking price. But Detroit traded for Marvin Bagley, so now they're going to start having that weird conundrum with forwards that I don't know. I guess they're going to want Bagley, but they don't really want Grant. Yep. So I mean, obviously, I'm going to ask you, hey, Craig, would you give up 2 first-round picks for Grant? And you should say no, or you could just never do this podcast with me again, because that's ridiculous. You don't give up 2 firsts
I
for
wouldn't.
him. But if it comes down to the draft day and they're like, you know what, give us New Orleans pick and I don't know, Josh Hart, and we're going to keep Josh, whatever, or another contract like, I don't. It doesn't matter. But let's just like Greg Brown or something. Give us Greg Brown. You can have Jeremy Grant in a first.
Greg Brown's pretty untouchable for me right now. No, so
well, I mean, it's that or you start looking at guys like Nas who plays a similar play style.
Yep. Your question is, I kind of sat back today and thought about it, and I know a lot of Blazer fans are frustrated because they did want Jeremy Grant. But here's the thing: if you think about it from the Blazers' perspective, you can see where your 2 picks end up, both your pick and the New Orleans pick. You can see where those end up before you even think about moving for Jeremy Grant. The other thing is, you don't want to win too many games because you still want to fall out of playoffs. So you just let Jeremy Grant play for the Pistons. Let him play for them. It doesn't matter how many games they win because we don't really care this year. And then this offseason, you can have the exact same discussions. You're both in the exact same place, but you may have 2 first-round picks. And as much as you have flexibility. It's all about flexibility at this point. And I don't think you need to rush to make any deals. I don't think you need to be in a hurry. I think you can use that trade exception that we've talked about multiple times. But you don't need to lock yourself in yet. Just stay open, stay flexible, because Jeremy Grant's not going anywhere. If Detroit doesn't move him now, they're going to reopen discussions this offseason, and he has 1 more year left on his contract, and you probably get him at an even cheaper price if one of those picks convey the way you want it to. So I don't see any rush.
No, he's the guy. He's still my number 1 target for this team because we just need a forward. We need somebody that can play both ways. He can score, he can defend. He's not elite at either of those 2 things, but he's better than anything we have ever had on this team in the Dame era. I mean, LaMarcus is fine, but as far as a forward goes, we got to have something. And 1 pick seems fine. Listen, Jeremy Grant he is what you hope a mid-round, first-round pick turns into. A young forward with his height and size who can shoot, who can drive, who can play defense. Again, not elite at any of those things, but pretty darn good at doing it. We've seen him. He's been consistent. That's another thing. He's moved from a couple different teams. He's played with Denver. So people that keep trying to tell me he's getting stats on a bad team. Yeah, Detroit is bad. But he played for Denver, don't forget. And he had meaningful minutes there. And he was with OKC. People may forget that had a pretty good record there. And he was a pivotal part of that for a couple of years before going to Detroit. And he took his bag and got his money. And it's good for him. But he is a darn good player. And he's what you would hope guys turn into. I personally would rather have him than Nasir Little. I know. Blazers fans come at me.
Because Nasir Little's starting to become injury prone. I've been talking about it all year this year, man. He's Zach Collins 2.0 right now. And so if you can cash in on that asset, I would do it with a first. I agree.
I just think he's the same type of player, and I think he's a little bit better. I don't know. This year's been upgrading every single year, and he's a little younger, but they're not. Grant to me fills that Dame era. You go get the talent now. You worry about the youth later. So I'm still all for that. That was the big topic. We were having discussions with Detroit. They fell through probably because they wanted both firsts, and we can't even guarantee both the first right now, at least not in the upcoming draft. And I think they were better suited to wait, and that's what they did.
I mean, and you talked about it too. John Collins, Julius Randle, those guys are probably going to be in the same boat this offseason.
If I'm not mistaken, Collins is a restricted free agent, or he's coming up on.
Oh, I thought he just got extended. I have to look at it.
Did he get it? He probably did. See, that's why I made it seem on the list.
Yeah, no, he did. He just got extended this last year, which people were kind of shocked that he signed a contract.
That's right. No, you're right. I didn't think I saw him on that free agent.
5 years, $125 million. So he makes $25 million a year through the next till 2026.
But I don't know. I feel like you take a guy like Jeremy Grant, or you can go spend money in free agency and throw a big pot at a guy like Bobby Portis, who's probably the best forward available. So
I want that.
That's where we're at.
But figure it out.
Anyway, that was the last big thing that happened with the team. That move wasn't made. There were a lot of other moves that were made, though, buddy. And I'm just before we get off here, I'm kind of curious what you think. What was your favorite non-Blazers move? We have the Harden Ben Simmons swap. We have the Halliburton for Sabonis swap, which a lot of people, the Kings fans, were just shooting themselves for, I guess. Okay. Porzingis for Dinwiddie, what happened today? I mean, the moves galore. What?
Yeah, my favorite trade was that Lakers trade. Oh, that's right. The Lakers didn't trade anybody.
We
That's
broke them.
right.
They couldn't think last night. We hit them right before the
Oh,
trade deadline. They're
dude.
like, I don't know what to do. Are we
Yeah.
good? Are we bad? Should we move guys?
Oh,
Should
we're
we not? They
terrible.
panicked and we broke them.
Yep. I will break you. No, okay. So, in my opinion, my favorite trade was kind of under the radar. I thought Derek White to Boston makes a ton of sense. I
Sneaky.
think Boston got him on the super cheap. They gave up Josh Richardson, and I don't get why the Spurs did that. The Spurs keep doing weird stuff where they get like Thad Young and then flip him for like nothing. They gave up Pirtle today. I understand DeJounte Murray and Derek White are kind of redundant because the two of them are both like good, but DeJounte Murray is starting to level up into like a Shea Gilgeous-Alexander type alpha dog guard. But I thought Derek White. The other one is I might be weird on this, but I think the Kings trading for Sabonis makes a ton of sense. I think
Really? You're in the
I
minority for sure from everybody
look
else online.
Sabonis is
Halliburton is like the next great thing,
I
I guess.
I I struggle with that because they have him and Fox makes more money, and Fox is probably not as good, and Halliburton's only 21, so I get it. But Sabonis is only 25 still. We have not defined his ceiling, and I think he's a really good elevating player. He can make you a playoff team, and that's something that Sacramento needs. Two guards is not something that they need. Now,
We would know.
nothing is ever going to make up for the Luka over Bagley thing and how they totally botched that draft. But I like Sabonis for them, and I think they needed to move one or the other, and they couldn't move Fox. So I get moving Halliburton right now.
Yeah, I'm torn on that. I agree with that. I think you have to have one of the two guards, and you have to have a big to be successful in this league, or at least
Yes,
some kind of a forward presence. They
Rashawn
still
Holmes is
kept
good,
Raquan
but
Holmes, mind you, and they still have
that's the part.
what's his face. They still have Barnes. So
Yeah, I
that
don't know.
I mean, they had to get rid of Buddy Hield too, so they lost one of the better shooters in the league. But I'm fine with that. I think Sabonis and
Yeah,
Fox is going to be fun. I think they're young. I think they got a core, and they've been competitive the last couple of years. Halliburton is a player of the future to me. Whereas right now I think Fox has established himself and Sabonis has established themselves, and you kind of know what you're going to get out of those two guys. You're going to build around that and go from there. But yeah, that
yeah.
was a tough one for a lot of people to swallow.
I thought it was pretty balanced, but we'll just. I mean, if Tyrese Halliburton turns
Right.
into Shea Gilgis, then I guess they're in trouble. But if you look at like OKC, they have Shea Gilgis and nothing else. So what
Right.
does that one player actually do for you? Whereas we know Sabonis is floor elevating big. I mean, I think he's really good, but whatever, we'll see.
I gotta say, I have two moves that I really liked, and I think seeing Levert go to Cleveland was great because I think that I know you're gonna be pissed about that one, but I think it was great. They didn't have to give like anything up. They got a really good wing player, not great,
Yeah.
but good wing player to go with Sexton, to go with Garland. They still got to keep all those bigs, a plethora of bigs.
They do have a lot of bigs.
And they're in play. They're fourth in the East, I believe, right now. So
Yeah.
they added a big piece, that mid tier player, that mid size to be able to guard wings and have that support. So that was one of my more favorite moves. And another really sneaky under the radar move I liked was Montrezl Harrell going to Charlotte.
Charlotte.
I
He's gonna be
love
good for
that.
them.
That team is.
Trez is good.
If I had to pick an East team just for fun, just to root for, it's Charlotte.
Yeah.
The athleticism, the ball movement, the dunking, the
LaMelo.
that is so much energy on that
Yeah.
team. I mean,
And
yeah, you
Miles
got
Bridges is
LaMelo. I mean, Rozier. They have so much
Yeah, I
athleticism
forget.
on that team. I mean, even Gordon Hayward's still fine, I guess.
He's
So
okay.
I don't know. I just they needed a big. Plumlee's just not it. He's not the it.
Yeah.
PJ Washington's been all right. He's fine.
I
But
mean,
I love what they're going to get with Harold, the energy and the hustle that he's going to bring. He's never been a super great, flashy big, and he's moved around a lot. But I think having a team like that, which is free flowing, young, athletic, just fun basketball, a guy like that with his attitude, to me, I don't know. It makes me super stoked for Charlotte.
yeah, I think honestly, one of the best trades was what the Clippers got from us. I think Norm and Rocco are going to help elevate them this year and next year. Okay, can you explain to me the Dinwiddie and Kristaps Porzingis swap? Like, what is
No.
Washington's goal here?
Both teams. I don't understand what the
doing?
Mavericks are doing. Like, listen,
Maybe they're getting
Kristaps
off of
is
Kristaps' money.
mediocre. I mean, that's part of it, but Dinwiddie's not necessarily cheap. I don't know.
I don't get it.
I don't. Dallas has wanted a guard for a while. CJ's come up a couple times. I've heard some
Brunson's
other stuff,
okay.
but Brunson's fine. I don't know. To me, they felt like Dwight Powell's just fine at the 4 position. They like Dorian Finney-Smith or whatever his name is.
Dorian Finney-Smith. He's on extension, so they need to clear the money for him. I get that.
And I think there's some of that stuff that comes into play. And Porzingis is what Porzingis is. I mean, he's at this point in his career, he's what he is. I don't know. Washington seems like a weird spot for him. Are you going to bring back Beal? Because if you don't bring back Beal, then your best player is now. You got rid of Dinwiddie. I think
Beal demands out.
Porzingis out. Like, I'm sorry, Washington fans.
They got Kuzma. Don't forget Kuzma's untouchable.
My boy Kuz.
They wouldn't move him today.
Yeah,
they were like, we're not going to move Kuzma.
Yeah. Yep. Kuz.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we got to go through some of that because we hadn't even talked about some of those extra deals, and I think that we're kind of aligned on all.
Still had Hart and Kuzma and Lonzo Ball
and Julius.
Good job on your bubbles. Your bubble championship Lonzo and everything Ball, was out of whack. There's no Golden State to threaten you.
Kuzma. But I mean, I was going to say they got that bubble championship, so that's probably good enough.
Yep, I guess so. They've all basically retired. They're at the age to retire, so mentally they're done. But that's it. That's all we got for this pod. We hope you guys enjoyed it. We want you to subscribe and like and all that good stuff.
Stay positive.
Who knows when our next episode is going to be? We're going to keep it a mystery, but probably not too long. We're going to see the new era of Blazers, where some of these other guys that we've traded away, how they're doing. So we'll keep you guys in the loop. Yeah. I am working on another guest here soon. I know we've had a couple promises of guests, and it hasn't worked out for some of their scheduling. But everybody's clamoring to be on Rip City Real Talk. So we're working. We're just trying to fit them into our busy schedules.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Like, subscribe, share.
If you was going to see little Damian Lillard commit suicide over getting rid of Norman Powell again.
Did he break his bobblehead?
He's fine. He's tough. He just hurt. His abdomen's a little sore. But
okay, real quick before we log off, and then we're gone. Super Bowl winner, Rams, Bengals, go.
I want Bengals. Go Bengals.
I'm going to say Rams win.
No way. It's just like Mahomes' second year. Burrow's it. It's the youth.
Cover the spread. 10 points.
10 points.
All right, just like that, everybody. We love you. We out.
Peace. Bye, guys.